Hello, and welcome to Come to Think of It. My name is Steve Nemerovski, and I'm your host. In today's episode, we're going to meet a young woman who has become one of my favorite columnists. And coincidentally, she's also heavily involved in teaching adults to read. So we not only meet a very talented writer, but we will continue our series on the reading apocalypse in America. I first learned about Larissa Phillips from the Free Press while reading of her adventures raising chickens in her backyard in Brooklyn. There is no egg supply crisis in her family. And I've read her columns ever since. Unexpectedly, her last column was entitled, "A Fifth of American Adults Can't Read, Here's How to Teach Them." As you can imagine, this is right in my wheelhouse. Not just an article about, not just an issue of a critical importance to me, but an article offering a solution. So today, we're coming to think about Larissa Phillips, her writing, and her teaching. We've got a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. Larissa, welcome to Come to Think of It.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
And we're talking to you today from your farm in upstate New York, not your backyard in Brooklyn, correct?
Nope. Yeah, I don't live in Brooklyn anymore full time. I'm almost always upstate on my farm.
But you still have all the eggs you need.
I have more eggs than I need, yeah.
So I've fallen in love with your writing, as I think a lot of America has, because if Free Press has adopted you, you've got something going. We were talking before the show started, though, of how you started in art, and then you started in writing, and then kind of got back to writing. Walk us through a little bit of your career and how getting back to writing has made a difference for you.
Sure. Yeah, I always liked to write. I was always a good writer. I always thought it was one of the strongest things that I had, for the marketplace. But I also liked art, so I majored in art in college. And then I always kind of sort of like roll my eyes at thinking of myself coming out of college being like, should I be a writer or an artist? Which is like, should I be a pauper or, or someone who lives in poverty? Like, they're both not really the most rational careers, but I chose writing. And so I wrote and edited for a while through my 20s. And I happened to be working on magazines in an era when magazines were dying in the 90s. So pretty much every job I had, the department closed, the staff contracted, the whole magazine folded. And like that just happened over and over again. And in my early 30s, a job fell into my lap working in adult ed, working with adults who were trying to finish high school, get into college. And then later I ended up kind of running into adults who couldn't read at all. And that just took over, and I stopped writing. I was writing for the adults. I was writing for adult literacy students, but I stopped writing my own essays.
And then again, how do you jump back in? You said an article that kind of jumped off the pages that you published in Quillette.
Yeah. So, the stuff going on in the world is heating up. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that might be upsetting to various people. Things were upsetting to me. And I was getting kind of angry about a lot. October 7th was a big sort of turning point for me, where I was just like, it's time to stop. It's time to stand up and start saying what we think. And I was already kind of poised, to start just standing up and saying what I thought. And there was an issue with the sexual assault case that was basically tried on social media, and it really infuriated me. And I'm a survivor of sexual assault from many, many years ago. And the whole way that sexual assault has been treated in the last several decades has really bothered me. The sort of eternal victimization, the trial outside of the courts. And so I wrote an article that was published in Quillette, Quill, 2 L's, I think, ETTE, Quillette, which is a journal out of Australia, very intellectual, really fantastic journal. And they published it, and it landed like wildfire and just took off. And I got the attention of a lot of people like Barry Weiss at the Free Press. And I started writing for the Free Press. And then so now I'm writing and having a second career as a writer.
Well, I don't know if this is a failing of me as a reader, but I read a lot, but I almost never pay attention to who wrote what I was reading. And I think I first read your chicken story, and then I turned out I read 2 or 3 or other your stories, but I never connected the dots because I don't look at who's writing stuff. And I later came back and, wait a minute, who is this woman? But you're not writing about I'm going to call difficult political type topics anymore. You're writing about life's experience. And I
Yeah.
kind of, I love that part of it. How did you get into that arena?
Yeah, well, it is connected for me to a lot of the political stuff. So my basic stance is that I come from a very, very progressive liberal background. I've spent most of my life being an extreme progressive liberal. And at a certain point, maybe in the last decade, I started kind of questioning a lot of the things that the progressive movement was doing and disagreeing with some of them. And education was certainly the first one where I was like, I don't think this is really, we can't keep going in this direction. We can't keep pulling that lever of taking away all the rigor, all the structure, all the curriculum, and making everything sort of a constructivist experience for the children. Like that's not working for children who are not getting education at home. So that really bothered me. And so in general, so I've had just sort of like a general kind of re-look at like I just feel like it's time to start looking at, let's assess. We've had since the 60s, we've had a big movement that's been very successful in terms of civil rights, gay rights, women's rights. There's been an atheist movement. There's been all these movements. And now it's been 50, 60 years. Let's assess and see what we want to keep. And then the resistance to assess that makes me really mad. And so a lot of my essays are about these things. Like I wrote an essay about being a wife. And I come from a feminist background. Being a wife was a bad word. It was something that when I was growing up, I'm Gen X. I grew up I was a kid in the 70s. I came of age in the 80s, and I was a young adult in the 90s. And we were not supposed to, being a wife was like the worst thing you could be. And yet I fell in love with my husband, and I loved being with him, and I wanted to have kids. And it was like a real, just sort of internal struggle to deal with that. So I wrote about that, and it was originally going to be something else. And my editor was like, you should lean into the wife aspect. And I was like, oh shoot. And I was joking that like my inner feminist was just bristling and hissing at me through the whole writing of that essay. And I keep joking also that I wrote about being a wife, because it's deep inside, it's still kind of a bad word. And I think that that's a little bit wrong. Like I wanted to reassess that. So it's kind of a celebration. That essay is a discussion about being a wife and coming to terms with that and really being happy about having a marriage and having a family. So
I also read that article without knowing what your name was, and I enjoyed that. And it seems to me that I've enjoyed all your articles. The two most important, I don't want to say not the two most important because I don't know your life. The two most important things I've read about you was this episode of falling in love, and then the marriage and the whole family thing that really weren't on the screen. And the other thing that was not on your screen is it was a chicken named Cloudy who kind of reversed your whole life and caused you to move to redneck country. So tell us about Cloudy.
Yeah, it was just Cloud, not Cloudy.
Oh,
but
Cloud,
yeah,
okay.
Great.
I like Cloudy better. Let's make it
Cloudy's
Cloudy
cute.
from
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. She was such a cool chicken. So we were living in Brooklyn, and I was pining for living in the country. I really, I love both. I love the city and I love the country. So I was happy in the city, but I was like pining for gardening, and I wanted chickens, and people had chickens in Brooklyn. So I was like, let's do it. So my husband agreed, and we got chickens, and it was very sweet. And then one day I got a phone call from the school coordinator at my kid's school, the parent coordinator, and she said, we have a chicken here. And it turned out the secretary's daughter had rescued a chicken from a slaughterhouse. I'm still not clear if the chicken had escaped and she found it on the street, or she went in and bought a chicken. I don't know. But so I was the chicken lady, because I would bring chickens to school events, and so she called me, and so I went and picked it up, and it was she was a silkie, which is like, they look almost like an Angora rabbit crossed with a chicken. They're white and fluffy, and they have like a top hat, and they're very funny looking, and they're a little bit spacey, and because they can't really see that well, so they're a little bit sort of just off balance. And she was also a little bit weird because she'd been raised in a slaughterhouse, so she didn't know how to scratch in the dirt, and she didn't know how to roost, and all these sort of normal chicken behaviors. And I actually wrote a whole essay about her on my Substack, where I write about my farm, and about how the other chickens were like these cheerleaders. They were identical because we got all the same breed, and they were so mean to her. And if she wandered into their end of the coop, because she would just sometimes she seemed like she was hungover half the time. She was just like always like, what? Where am I? I don't know. And she would wander over, and they would all attack her, and then she'd have to run back. And she was just such a weirdo, and like she reminded me of like a girl, the girl in high school who like wears the vintage clothing and like is just like sits by herself at the lunch table. You know, I thought she was great. And then we discovered that she was sitting. We made her own little coop. We discovered she was sitting on rocks, and because she wanted to hatch chicks so badly. And she didn't really lay eggs. They're not really big egg layers. So she had pulled rocks into her nest, and she was sitting on the rocks. And it wasn't the reason we moved out of the city, but it was added to the list. You know, our dog is depressed in the city, and we need to get a rooster so that Cloud can hatch chicks. And so we did. So we moved out, and there were a lot of other reasons too. And we moved out, and we right away got a rooster, and we had fertilized eggs. And so we put some fertilized eggs underneath Cloud, and she hatched them. And it was amazing. And she was an incredible mother, which her breed is known to be an incredible. They're really good mothers. People even buy them to sit on eggs and to raise chicks because they're such good mothers. And she would sleep with her, even after her chicks like started roosting, they were like teenagers, and she would sleep next to them, and she would put her arms over them, and they got bigger and bigger. They were bigger than her. She was finally sleeping with her arms like up over her like adolescent boys. It was really funny. So she was a character.
So it was either get a dog therapist and a chicken therapist or move to the farm. I got it. It's good. And you love your farm. And by the way, another article I love is the article you wrote about being on the farm and having your kids learn about birth and death. Another really great article.
Well, so I run a farm stay. So we have this little farm that we started. It's really like a hobby farm. I mean, we have animals for meat, and we have a big garden, but we were doing it for our kids and for the experience. And then we had a little cottage on our property, so I started Airbnb-ing it. And then during COVID, especially, I kind of went into it hard and started doing farm camp for the kids. So it was amazing in COVID because the people would come up and they'd stay for a week, and the only person they would have contact with was me, and it was all outside, and it was amazing, and it was so much fun, and just teaching these city kids about really basic life experiences that they don't get. I mean, ranging from like, oh yeah, there's a dead chipmunk in the trough, let's scoop it out. That happens sometimes. Or there's a mother hen, watch out for the chicks. We have to be careful of mothers. We have to protect mothers. Don't walk into the mother hen and her chicks. You know, I have to teach kids this kind of thing. Or, you know, we're going to scoop manure. Yes, it's poop. You know, like, and then they're from the city, so they've heard their whole lives, stay away from the poop. So it's a big problem. And then the chickens are mating, and you know, it's just like, it's a microcosm of like the natural world, even though it's domestic farm animals, but it still is so much more of the natural world than they ever encounter. And even like pulling wagons, like they don't know how to pull wagons. They get stuck. I mean, a 3-year-old fine, 4 or 5-year-old fine, but like 6, 7, like, come on, you can figure it out. Like, look, it's the wheel is caught, like, you know, so they have to learn these things explicitly, and they're not learning them. So I feel like it's all, sometimes I feel like I'm doing occupational therapy with it, because the kids are holding the hose, and I'm like, okay, two hands, because one hand's not, you have no control over the hose with one hand. 2 hands, and then get a little closer, you know, like you really have to teach them like explicitly, step by step sometimes. And then it's lovely because then they become experts, and I really enjoy that process. Like I love it. I love it. I'm always like, I play dumb, you know, I'm like, what's next? What do we have to do next? And after like the 2nd or 3rd day, the kids are like, feed the ponies, you know, and I'm like, well, what do we feed them again? The hay, you know, and then they come back year after year. I have a lot of kids who come year after year. I've seen kids go from like being toddlers to being like they're 10 years old now. And it's amazing. It's a beautiful job. I love it.
So you're probably too young to know this, but when I was growing up, there was this wonderful writer. Her name was Irma Bombeck. Yeah. And she was more of a humorist than you are. There's touches of humor, but not the way I think of her. But my recollection of her is she was someone who you would read and you would just learn about life. I don't know if like I had the Will Rogers movement up to the Irma Bombeck movement, and that's kind of where I see you today. You're just bringing life to the table and letting people live your life, but at the same time, they're seeing that there's other parts of the world that they should be aware of. And this is the educator, I think, in you that's bringing that stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a natural impulse, I think.
So I spent most of my life in politics, and I've worked with many people, and I was a lobbyist for most of my career. Worked with many people on the progressive side of the ledger. But as a lobbyist, I was always known as a problem solver. And I think you bumped into one of the things I learned very early on in politics is that the progressives are always incredibly dug in on their issue. And if you could pass some legislation where they could get 30% of what they want or 40% of what they want, they won't take it. They either have to get 100% of what they want or they don't get it. And you said you had to assess a little. There were great programs, but like maybe let's take a snapshot here, guys, because maybe we have to look at the world a little differently. And I think that's what I enjoy so much about Barry Weiss and the Free Press, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So the one article you wrote that really resonated, other than the one we're going to talk about today about reading, was the one about love thy neighbor. Because now you found yourself in, let's call it Trump country, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah.
I want to say, and you found yourself, well, I'm going to make up a word, with lovable rednecks, because a lot of progressives in the city think redneck is a 4-letter word. And you wrote an article about that. Can you walk us a little bit through that? I think maybe catharsis is too strong, but walk us a little bit through the background on that thinking.
Yeah, that was, I loved that article. And I was just going to put it on my Substack, and I was so glad that that the Free Press wanted to run it. And then they ran it right before election, like the Sunday, I think the Saturday or Sunday before the election day. And it was about how we were progressive liberals who moved up from Brooklyn, from Park Slope, which I don't know if Park Slope is like the Berkeley of Brooklyn. It's like their jokes about like, in this house, we don't say no to our children. And it's extreme. And so we moved up from there to Trump country. And I came in like just a typical snob. Like I look back now, I was a snob. I had no interest in associating with anyone who was from my local area. I just wanted to find the other kind of expatriates, the other city expatriates. And I resisted it. But then through the years, I kind of discovered that they were cool. They were nice. I got to know them. And then when Trump, because we moved up in 2010, so this was before Trump. And then when Trump happened, I was kind of shocked. I could not believe that they were, embracing Trump, who I just thought was horrible. And but then again, like we just kind of moved on and we kept going. And then there was this one story that happened. Well, first, so I had we had moments where people would like help us out. Like people in Trump country are typically very helpful. They would like my husband and I have like hand shovels, and I told this in the article that. We would be shoveling in the snow out of our driveway, and our neighbor would pull up with just happened to have his 4-wheeler and a snowplow on the back of his truck, and he'd be like, that's ridiculous. And he'd unload everything and plow our driveway for us. Incredibly nice. And so many occasions like that. And then I had this, this one, I thought it was very humorous, but I'm going to tell you the backstory about it too, because one of my daughter's friends came over and they were 9th graders, something like that. And he saw a book. He was very perceptive. He was like a kid from the area. I'm sure his father was I'm sure his parents were Trump supporters. And he saw a book that had the word liberalism in it. It was actually a critique of liberalism, but he didn't catch that. But, and he saw that we had blue corn chips, organic blue corn chips. And he was very perceptive. He was like, are you guys liberals? And he was shocked. So he told my daughter that he was never going to come over to our house again, and it bothered me. So I wanted him to like me, so I was like kind of offended, and I asked him to walk my dog because he loved our dogs. He was actually a really nice kid, and he was a very talented kid, and he was a photographer, which he still does, and so asked him to walk my dog, who was really old and who needed to be walked during the day, and he was lovely, and he was so nice. And then when I told him we were going to euthanize her, and he came over while his dad sat out in the parking lot in the driveway, and he said goodbye to my dog, and it was so beautiful and so lovely. And I think that was kind of like the emotional sort of like end of the essay, and a lot of people told me they cried because it was so sweet. It's like, who cares? Like this kid, I don't care what his politics are. He loves dogs, and he loves my dog, and I don't know. It was just beautiful. But so the backstory is I did not think that article was going to go viral the way it did. Bill Maher talked about it on his show, and like in depth, like for like 5 minutes. And so people in my neighborhood saw it, and the boy read it. And I had used his real name because I thought I was going to put it on Substack, and then I thought it was going to go on the Free Press. No one would read it, like, or some, some people, but no one. And I just like didn't think it through. So he reached out to me, and he messaged me, and he was like, I read your article. And he's like 20 now. And he was so lovely. He said he was so gracious. I apologized profusely for using his name. And but he said he was embarrassed that he used to be so close-minded, and that he's grown up a lot. And he agrees with me that we should all, get along regardless of our political affiliations. So it was really nice.
Yeah, I hope you're going to write more articles along those themes. I have gotten to the point in my life where I just hold both parties in equal contempt, and I'm very, very concerned about these silos we're living in. So if people like you can help break down these silos and break it down through your real life stories, I think that's going to go a long way. I don't know if you saw the Bill Maher episode or heard the Bill Maher podcast where he went and visited the White House.
Oh, yeah.
And I've heard this myself, and I've talked with journalists from the New York Press who were visiting Aspen, and they've all said to me, one-on-one in a room with Trump, he's many things, but nothing like his public persona. And Trump may not want that to be out because he's built a persona that works for him in the political environment. But the more people like you that can figure out a way to cross lines and tell these stories, you can defend your politics, but I don't want people doing it in a world of silos. So thank you for doing that.
No, thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's crazy. We're a country, and we're built on having two different parties. There is some benefit to one party keeping the other party in check. Now it's gotten very pathological at this point. But we're not supposed to all agree. We're supposed to be able to have discussions and disagreements, and that's one of the things that I think is so unfortunate right now is you can't even discuss things without people getting really angry and deciding they hate you because you have a different opinion.
So this is going to be our closing of our segment on Larissa Phillips, the amazing writer, storyteller, farmer, everything else you are. And then we're going to take a quick break and come back and get into the teacher and the lady who just wrote a brilliant article on what it's going to take to teach 48 million people how to read. So let's take a quick break and come right back. Thank you.
Have you ever felt lost in the voting booth? With 518,000 elected officials in the United States, it's no wonder elections are complicated. From local school boards to the presidency, there are so many choices. And that's where Ballotpedia comes in, your one trusted source. Because the only unknown on your ballot should be who gets your vote. Our sample ballot lookup tool shows you exactly who and what will be on your ballot. Just enter your address, select your upcoming election, and prepare to vote informed. You can even save your favorites and print your completed sample ballot. With Ballotpedia, vote with confidence and vote informed.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the first segment with Larissa Phillips. And I apologize that we're not doing a whole segment on her writing and her stories. We could probably have a weekly show on the Larissa Phillips show, and she could talk about all her wonderful stories. And maybe we'll get her to come back as a guest. But this is about the literacy apocalypse, and I had always thought about the kids, and the young kids in school, and the kids getting out of school, and they can't read. And lo and behold, a few weeks ago, there's an article, and if you remember from 15 minutes ago, I don't even read who writes these things. It was written by Larissa, talking about the fact that 20% of the adults in our country do not read at a sufficient level. And then I learned she's doing all this amazing work to help solve this problem. So we're going to move from Larissa Phillips, the storyteller, the writer. We're going to talk about Larissa Phillips, the educator. So Larissa, let's get going here. You got a lot to tell about being an educator. And you mentioned that in the first phase, that there was a phase of your life when you were in the education realm, and you were discovering the world of literacy. So walk us a little bit through that.
Okay, sure. So when I was in my early 30s, I I just
So
kind of
that was a couple
stumbled.
weeks ago, from what I can tell.
Yeah, exactly. I stumbled into a job running a tutoring program for adults who were trying to get their GEDs, get their citizenship, get into college. And so I started working there. I was in Manhattan. I loved it immediately. I had no back. I basically talked my way into the job, and I absolutely loved it. I was working with people not only from the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens, but also people from Africa and China and Russia. I mean, it was a very exciting place to be, and it was like run down, and the building was just in shambles, but it was so vibrant. I really miss it because ever since COVID, we're not there anymore. But it was really lovely, and so as I'm doing that, and I'm learning how to teach, I'm learning principles of teaching, it's challenging my very deeply held, very progressive ideas of education, and because what's the best way to teach people, and while that's all going on, I start getting people coming in who want to learn how to read, and they kind of come in through the transom. They're not part of the recruitment process. They kind of just wander in. They heard from somebody that they could come here, and somebody comes here for GED, and they were like, "Can you help me with learning to read?" And I was like, "Sure." Because I had no idea how hard it is to teach reading. I learned how to read very easily, and I just figured I know how to read. I could probably teach people how to read. And I discovered very quickly that certainly the people who are the adults who cannot read are the reason they cannot read is because reading is hard for them to learn. They're not the kid, the 3, 4, 5-year-old who just watched a few episodes of Sesame Street and figured it out. People have different capacities for learning how to read. So the people who have trouble learning how to read as adults, they have all been trying. Everyone I have met has been trying for their entire lives. Their husbands or wives have tried to teach them, their siblings have tried to teach them, their parents have tried to teach them, and they can't learn. And so they are generally, I mean, they just, most of them display signs of dyslexia to one degree or another. And then there are socioeconomic factors that make everything harder, and there are factors that come with just being an adult that make going to school harder. But I discovered very quickly that my intuitive approach was not going to work, and it was horrible. I described in the article how I was like, "Oh yeah, let's read this children's book," which was already kind of like not really a good practice. Why should an adult have to read a children's book? And then it wasn't a decodable book. It was a beautiful book for children with varied text, like varied word structure and wonderful big vocabulary, and the student couldn't read it, and her attention and her confidence and her enthusiasm just deflated in front of me, and it was awful. And I kind of resolved I was never going to put a student in that situation again.
And from your research, you found that as much as almost 50 million people are in this position? That's a staggering number to me.
Yeah, under the 6th grade level. There's different statistics, but yeah, when I first started hearing statistics, I heard 36 million under the 3rd grade level, and I was like, that sounds like a lot. And I was like, but you know what? Even if it's 18 million, that's a lot. Like, and then it went up to now. I think it's 48 million now. Yeah, it keeps going up, and it's
these numbers are just unbelievable. And what we've done as a society, and I've written about this myself, and I got to get back to this. I think we have what I call a dropout problem. We let people drop out of society, so they get to be 16 and they drop out. They may start a family or not, but if they start a family, they can't teach their kids to read because they don't know how to read. And then there's another 16 years, and there's another series of dropouts, and you have some families with 2 or 3 generations
absolutely
of can't read.
Multi-generational literacy
And
problems.
I know from the statistics, a friend of mine who was the head of the school system in Chicago and Philly and some other places, Paul Vallis, a great teacher, that the size of the dropout problem is enormous. So if you just do some simple math, and if you lose 10 or 15% of the kids every year, and you wake up 30 or 40 years later, it's not a surprise if you have 50 million people, 1, who can't read, but 2, and you sent me some information on this, they can't teach people to read. And I think the quote you sent me was that moms are the most important part of kids learning to read.
The biggest predictor, the best predictor of a child's literacy is the mother's literacy level, because the mother's going to bring the kid up to where she is at the very least.
Yeah, and we've managed to lose that. Now, I've read a lot about this also But you encapsulate it very nicely in the article. I wonder if you could spend a few minutes on this, how as a country we've experimented quite a bit with different reading philosophies and reading curriculums that, from my perspective, just aren't working. Can you talk a little bit about, as a country, what this was about and quite frankly, where we're at today?
Yeah, well, there are jokes like, how far back does it go? Does it go back to Dewey? Or, and then it's like, no, it goes back to Rousseau, because it's like this idea of the free spirit. It's a beautiful idea. The child's a free spirit. You don't want to like infringe his natural noble spirit with all these like letters and learning and drills and, so there was this idea that really took off in the 20th century and in the 60s and 70s, certainly, to really give children free reign. And the idea that teaching reading to children with drills was painful and boring. And you're going to lose the joy of reading. So there came about several different methods, different incarnations of what we could sort of sum up as the whole word method. The idea that instead of learning the letters and learning how to sound out, learning what letters stand for what sounds and how to string them together and take them apart, how to sound things out, instead you teach the whole word. So the student learns the whole word. And that's like Dick and Jane it was called the look-say method. So it's very repetitive, because the idea was the student would just say it again and again, and they would learn to memorize said and Dick and Jane and dog. And they did, but then there's a stopping point. You can't memorize. I mean, the human brain cannot memorize enough words to be a fluent reader, but also like they didn't even do books past Dick and Jane. So it's such a flawed, you know what I mean? There wasn't like the next level of Dick and Jane books that took you all the way up to high school reading, where you were just memorizing words, and it just didn't work. And there was no evidence. And so Dick and Jane got pushed out, and then because it was boring, and then we had Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss was asked, Theodore Geisel was asked by his publisher to make stories using the most popular words, the most commonly used words, so the kids could memorize the words by sight, the whole word. And it went on. And then, then we had whole language in the 70s. And there's a little bit of a revolution happening now, which I think I would attribute mostly to Emily Hanford's podcast series, Sold a Story, which, if anyone hasn't listened to that, if you have any interest in the nation's children being educated and learning how to read, you should listen to it. It's a fantastic podcast, Sold a Story, because the idea is we were sold a story that this was the way to teach reading, and that it could be done this way. And the evidence is very clear that that's not the way to teach reading.
And you're trying to take some of these theories and apply them to these adults that you're teaching, and it's not working.
Exactly. Well, yeah, because so the adult world, I mean, whole language, that specific incarnation of the whole word method called whole language is totally discredited. No serious educator would use, no school would say we're using whole language. There's no reading curriculum for public school that's whole language. It's totally discredited. And yet adult literacy programs across the country say they're using whole language to teach students to read. And that's crazy. I think it's shameful. There's no evidence. And when I talk to the people running these programs, they're not interested in evidence. They're not interested in knowing what are the best practices. They just are. I mean, they're not really that interested in these students, honestly. I don't think. So, and there are many that say they don't even teach students below the 4th grade level.
And that's the shame of it. So we've had all these experiments that aren't working, yet there are ways that we know from the past that did work. We just didn't want to use them anymore. And we're gonna take a quick break here. The teaser is going to be that Larissa Phillips has found some ways that have worked, and you've developed a bit of a curriculum of your own, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Good. Let's break here, and we're going to come back and learn the Larissa Phillips method. Food Bank of the Rockies is the largest hunger relief organization in the Rocky Mountain region. Currently, they are responding to the highest levels of hunger they've seen in 10 years. Through their network of hunger relief partners, including those here in Aspen, and food distribution events, the food bank is committed to providing nutritious and familiar foods to individuals across the Western Slope. Here's an example of their great work.
When I saw the long line of cars, I thought there's such a need in the valley. What it feels like when you don't have food is that you've let your family down. I'm Sherry Lee. I'm 62 years old and I live in Grand Junction, Colorado. We were homeless and they fed us. We're better off than we've ever been, thanks to the food bank of the Rockies.
So if you were with us in our last two segments with Larissa Phillips, I threw out the big teaser at the end there. You know, I want you to go get your snack and come back here. The big teaser is Larissa Phillips has solved all the problems of the world, and we're going to learn about them in the next 15 minutes. But I don't want to burden her with that, because even if she's solved them, she has to write about them first, and that's how we'll learn about the solutions. The one solution she has written about, though, is she has found, I don't want to call it the silver bullet, the magic bullet, she's found a way to communicate with adults and actually get them to read. And that's the bottom line. People have got to learn how to read. So, Larissa, solve the problems of the world for us.
Okay. So I was working with students who couldn't read and discovering that I didn't know how to teach them. And then I was discovering that nobody that I could find in the adult ed world knew how to teach reading. And I very specifically heard, I don't think anyone knows how to teach adults how to read. And those methods are dated, don't use those methods. And I just wasn't finding anything. And so I finally looked in the children's world and I discovered the way that you teach dyslexic children through structured phonics, which is sequential, methodical, explicit curriculum in the reading code. So you're teaching, you know, A is ah, and how to blend the sounds, and you're doing it explicitly and methodically and in order, and it's very organized. And so I got certified in Wilson reading. I learned how to teach in one of the programs that seemed the most popular and respected. And I brought that back to my program. And right away I had problems because, first of all, there was only one of me, and I had to have volunteers use it. And then also some of the things they weren't quite right for adults. They didn't work for us. So I just started kind of tweaking it, and then I ended up just rewriting the whole thing. Still, you can still see, I always say, you can still see the bones of Wilson in it. You can still see the influence, especially because it's still methodical. You go step by step, and it's sequential. It's in order. It builds on itself. And it's explicit. We teach explicit strategies. We never want the student to guess or to use their intuition. We want them to have strategies that then do become intuitive, but not at the beginning. They're not intuitive, and we're not expecting the student to have, the word pop into their head. So I ended up finally making like a very detailed scripted program. It's scripted because I need volunteers to use it, and we need to be as simple and organized as possible. The dyslexic brain that has trouble reading is very chaotic from my experience. There's a lot of panic and swirling kind of like neural misfirings, and it's kind of amazing as you see a student start working the program that they come in just absolute chaos and panic almost when they can't read something, and then they start to sort of get in order. And so we needed everything to be as methodical and organized, and as little talking, as little extra talk as possible. So it's scripted, and it's been great. And it's gone through many incarnations. I'm always looking at the research. I'm always trying to find out what is the best way to teach reading. And a few years ago, I started a nonprofit called the Volunteer Literacy Project because I wanted to share it. I wanted to be able to extend this to other places because I still did not see any other adult appropriate curriculum that worked with volunteers.
I want to get to your project, but I don't want to leave the curriculum yet because I want to ask you a few questions about that. One of my takeaways from your article, again in the Free Press, is that you're actually holding them to be responsible. I've done a lot of teaching in our university systems and other places, and students just expect to kind of go along, get along approach to life. You're kind of holding their feet to the fire and giving them assignments and asking them to be responsible. I hope I'm not reading too much into that, but bringing some responsibility back is also an important part of making curriculums work.
Yeah, although I would say that for the adult students who are possibly a self-selecting crowd, that's not an issue. There's no classroom management. They want to work hard. In fact, it's almost harder to give them something that's enjoyable to read at a certain point. They want to work. They want to do the work. They will go through. And this is some of the painful experiences I had where I was asking them at the beginning to do things that were inappropriate and didn't work, and they did not care. they were going to go through any discomfort that I gave to them. And so it's been incredible to actually now give them things that do work. And I hear from them all the time, this is exactly what they wanted. I had a student just the other day who there was some question about whether she should move on to the next level or not. And I said, I think we want you to be a little more automatic. I think we should stay on this longer. And she said, you know what, that is exactly why I love this program. Because she didn't want to jump ahead. She wants to do a good job. She wants to do it. She wants to do the work. So actually, I think that I've kind of brought a curriculum that matches what they want. And a lot of the whole word stuff is way more loosey-goosey and kind of like, hey, we just want you to feel good. And we don't want to, challenge you. That's what I've found. So it's a very serious program, and the students are expected to come at least twice a week, and they respond to that. The ones who don't can't keep coming. They can't do it.
And what is the magic number of students can you teach 2 at a time and be effective? Is it 2, 3, 4? Can you get up to 12 or 15? Is there?
I don't think so. It's really based on a remedial program, so a remedial intervention. So one-on-one is really best. I'll do two students sometimes, but we really are trying to do one-on-one so we can really target that student-specific trouble spots and, just really take them along.
Okay.
So one-on-one is best.
All right, now I had cut you off. A very important thing we must cover here before the show ends is the volunteer literacy project that you've started, how it works, and how our viewers can get involved. So let's walk us through that one.
Yeah, so it's still a very only a few years old, the Volunteer Literacy Project. I'm just trying to share this curriculum. So the model is that the students don't pay for it. They never pay for anything. And the volunteers and the literacy centers for now are getting it for free because I just want to share it. So my model is a fundraising model. So I'm always looking for funders and donors. And I'm also, I've started now writing on Substack about our work. So if you search Substack Volunteer Literacy Project, you'll get my Substack. And it's one of the best ways actually to support us is to become a paying subscriber or to be a donor. Or the other thing is we're not looking for volunteers right now. I got a massive influx of volunteer offers after the article ran in the Free Press. So we are good with volunteers, but I am looking always for literacy programs that want to run this curriculum, libraries that want to do it, churches, groups. I'm looking for groups who want to take this on, and I will provide training. I provide training for the volunteers or for somebody who wants to lead a community group. And that is really where we're at right now, is trying to find these community groups that will lead their own program.
And is the training like YouTube type videos you've put together? How's the training accomplished?
It's Zoom. It's about, for the regular training, it's 6 weeks. For the community leaders, it's 8 weeks. It's on Zoom. It's every week, once a week, a couple of hours in the evening.
And we talked in the last segment about the failures of the curriculum modeling for teaching in America. Are you getting reactions from people that are teaching reading that are trying this and giving you feedback? And if so, what kind of feedback are you getting?
Yeah, well, anybody who is on the same page with structured phonics can see that this is what we're doing. So yeah, everybody who's already on that page is into it. I do get sometimes volunteers who occasionally who are still doing, they want to do whole word. And they don't like structured phonics. They don't like the drills, but they're not. So that's fine. They're not a good fit for our program.
And when you've taught an adult to read to a sufficient level, and by the way, what is your level that you want to get them to? Do you have a set level that you're trying to teach?
So it's tricky. It is hard to get somebody to a GED level. I do have some students who've gone on and taken the GED. But most of our students, I would say, are probably always going to be, it's going to be hard for them they're going to be slow readers. But what we find is every step changes their lives. So if you're a student who, I had a student who he got a new job and he could go into the bathroom. He got a checklist every day and go in the bathroom and he could read the checklist. He would tap out the sounds and he could read the checklist, and that was new for him. So that is not GED level, but that was life-changing for him, that he could read the checklist at his work. So so we try to celebrate every step. Our goal is to get students to functional literacy, so about a 4th grade level. And after that, if they want to keep going, we can either keep them going or we can send them to another program. but that's our goal, is just functional literacy. We want to just do those first 4 levels really well.
So that's considered functional literacy as 4th grade reading. I'm just curious, if someone goes through your program and they get to the 4th grade level, I've done a lot of teaching. I've always felt that I learn more when I prepare to teach a class than not. So I'm wondering if any of the people that are your graduates are then taking this and trying to teach children in their family, or are you even encouraging that they would learn more if they then try to help teach a young child in their family. So they've accomplished 2 things. They'll become better readers in order to become that teacher, and the child in the family will get to learn. Now we're coming back to what we talked about before. The mom is the predictor of where the child is going to end up, and I think it could be the whole family could be the predictor. So maybe if you could take these people and encourage them to now become teachers of the method, they already know the method, they can now maybe drill back down into their family and bring your method into their own families.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's one of my real beefs with what's happened with reading in the last several decades is that the ability to teach reading has been taken away from like the kitchen table, you know, the proverbial kitchen table, but it's become like almost this mystical thing that happens, and the parent has no control over it and no connection to it. And so that it used to be that I think a lot of moms knew how to teach reading, and I didn't know how to teach reading. You know, I had to learn how to teach reading. And I think that that's crazy. And it's one of the things I want to do is just share the ability to teach reading. Like when my kids were in 1st grade, the teachers, my son, when he was in 1st grade, the teacher sort of teased us for wanting to know when the kids were going to learn how to read. And she was like, oh, they're all going to learn. You'll see. By April, most of them will be learning and will be reading. And that was like it. And it's like, no, it's not like a lightning bolt from the muse. It's work. And the parents can be involved in that, and they should be involved in it. So I do really want to re-infuse that knowledge into the community.
So you've started the Volunteer Literacy Project, and for the last part of the show here, give us the pitch. What do you want people to do? You said you've got a lot of volunteers right now, but it still probably wouldn't hurt to have some volunteers. Look, you said you need some funding, and you've written a lot about this. Now tell us on TV, what can we do to help you?
Yeah, I'm always looking for donors for financial support, because it's a tiny program, and we're really kind of running it out of like, you know, my living room basically. So we're always looking for that, and with any funding that we get, one of the things that we're doing is we're building more resources. We're building more like workbooks and books. Like for example, I wrote City Stories, which is published by Townsend Press, which is a decodable set of decodable stories for adults, written starting at all short vowels and then all consonant blends, etc. And it's great. It's a great resource, and we're writing more, you know, and we're attaching workbooks to the curriculum. So we're always just trying to expand the resources. So donations are always so appreciated. Following us on Substack, you can be a free subscriber. You can be a paid subscriber, which is very, very appreciated, and you can see what we're doing. I'm doing a live Substack on Sunday to talk about different ways that people can get involved. It's just a great way to stay connected with us, to follow us on Substack.
Well, Larissa, you've been a great guest. I want to thank you. Hopefully we can have you back. I have a feeling a few months from now I'll have read a whole new series of articles you've written that I want to talk to you about, and you'll probably awaken me to some other great moments in your life that I think my viewers have got to learn about. So all the best to you and everything you're doing, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure. I've really enjoyed being here.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our time with Larissa. I know I did, and as I always say, and come to think of it, I want you to be educated, and we want you to be entertained. And if you didn't get educated and entertained today, don't watch my show anymore, because this was as entertaining and educational as you can get. I want to encourage you to read Larissa's work. I read it in the Free Press. I don't know if it's available in other places. And I'm a fan of the Free Press. We're going to pitch to Larissa and the Free Press here all at one time. But this show and some of the other shows we're doing are as much about this literacy apocalypse as anything. And you heard what Larissa said. She could use some funding. And if anything, get educated on this topic. We had another segment with 311 Literacy. They're doing great work. Larissa's doing great work, and we're going to keep moving along here, because I'm going to keep bringing you solutions. And what I want you to do is I want you to jump in these solutions. It just pains me that we live in the greatest country in the world on earth, and we have so many people that can't read. I can't connect those dots. So hopefully you'll help me connect those dots, and Larissa and 311 Literacy, all the people in this space, let's just make this a great cause and pursue it. So as always, thank you for joining us, and we'll hope you'll be with us again on Come to Think of It. Thank you.